Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daryl Urbanski, your host as always. And today we are joined by Marvin Karlow. Marvin is an investment banker and sell-side mergers and acquisition advisor focused on lower middle market companies. He brings 30 years of experience as a business owner with multiple successful exits, a C-suite executive in both private and public companies, and a transaction leader across industries like software as a service, enterprise software, manufacturing, financial services, insurance, healthcare, and e-commerce. Marvin helps owners achieve the outcome they want from a sale: maximum value, creative terms, or minimize risk. His approach blends deep business understanding, strong buyer marketing, sharp deal terms, disciplined negotiation, and precise execution, so clients exit on their terms. I've asked him to join us here today to share his story and insights into doing mergers and acquisitions well. Marvin, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you, my friend?
Daryl, thank you for having me. I'm great. I really want to meet this Marvin guy. He sounds fantastic.
Maybe you get a chance. I could do an intro of you.
Who knows? He might make an appearance.
Well, I appreciate you making time to join us here today. And like we said before, this is a topic that I think it's a valuable skill set. Not that I have it, but I recognize it. The hierarchy of not knowing, what is it? You're unconsciously incompetent, consciously incompetent, consciously competent, unconsciously competent. I'm consciously incompetent in this, but I recognize the value of the skill set in business. And a lot of people, it just seems like a mystery to them. So I think that there's a lot of value people can get from today's talk. And before we even get into that, though, I want to start with, how did you even get into this? I mean, do you come from a family of entrepreneurs? Were your parents buying and selling and building businesses, or how did you even get into it?
Actually, completely the opposite. I come from an academic family. Like, my father was a physics professor and my grandfather was an engineering professor, and I've got a couple uncles. And no, I mean, a big financial transaction in my family was buying a used car. That was a major outing. So no, in fact, I remember someone sitting me down and saying, "Now listen, Marvin, you've got a little bit of a math brain. So here's what I want you to understand. Profit is equal to revenue minus expense." Like, I remember that day. So I was not born into this by any stretch.
So then how did you get started?
Well, I started like every investment banker. I got a PhD in physics. That's where we all start. And then I was an executive, for both kind of startup sized businesses, all the way through to Texas Instruments and JP Morgan Chase and LexisNexis. I left LexisNexis as the chief operating officer of one of their sort of big software divisions. And my business partner and I bought sort of the most blue collar of possible businesses. We bought a metal finishing company in Florida. And, one of the things that enabled us to do that was, through my corporate career, I'd been involved sort of directly and indirectly in a lot of M&A work. And so I had some sense how you went about buying a business. And then my partner and I, obviously buying something in a public company is a completely different undertaking than buying something on your own. So we did. And then, we did a fair amount of M&A sorts of transactions to grow our business. And then, inorganically. And then ultimately we exited to a publicly traded company at the end. And, that put me in a position where I could sort of pick what I wanted to do as opposed to having to do something. And one of the things that I'd seen kind of consistently throughout this journey was that lower middle market businesses, and believe it or not, the lower middle market is sort of defined as $100 million in enterprise value and below.
Yeah.
If you can believe it. That's the lower middle market, right? But especially towards the lower end of the lower middle market, people have very, very poor representation. I mean, even if your company's worth $30 million, you can end up with a broker that just doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I saw people leaving a lot of money on the table in terms of the valuation of their business, or taking a lot more risk in the deal terms than they really needed to take, or, in a lot of cases, just failing to get a deal done, which should have been, more or less a layup. And the consistent theme was they had an incompetent representative. And so, I went out and got the education, and I had the experience to hopefully be competent. And then I just sort of set about trying to help one business owner at a time achieve an outcome that was, closer to what my business partner and I had been blessed to achieve versus, a zero.
Right. Yeah, that's a big. So let's walk through this. I mean, what are typically sort of the biggest mistakes people are making?
I mean, there's a whole list. One of the first things is that you just don't find a buyer in the first place, right? Okay. Well, that in my mind is 100%, the broker's fault, because that's their, for the first half of the process, that's really their only job, is help you package your company, or package your company for you, market it as broadly as possible, and get you the best offer that the market will bear. But unlike, call it real estate, where there's an MLS and sort of a vibrant ecosystem of realtors and all of that sort of thing, there's a lot more friction in business sale transactions. And so, if you just sort of write up a 3-page offering memo and put an ad on Biz Buy Sell and wait for the phone to ring, and that's literally all a lot of people will do for their client, you're going to take the first offer, if there is one, that kind of comes across the transom, and hope you can get that across the finish line. That's not, if your business is worth $200 million, that's not how your experience goes at all. You're working with a Wall Street investment bank. They're giving you white glove service. They're packaging your business together. They're highlighting all of the strengths, and they're helping you manage around or through the, kind of weaknesses. They're finding buyers where there's a good fit, where there's synergy, where there's strategic value, whatever it is. They're managing all of those conversations and negotiations. They have multiple people involved in the process at the same time, so there's competition. There's no price on anything ever. It's just, Daryl, what do you think it's worth? Judy, what do you think it's worth? Bob, what do you think it's worth? Well, if you know that there's 2 other people bidding for something and you really want it, what are you doing? You're figuring out ways to raise your bid. And then if I'm doing my job as a banker, I'm giving you some feedback. Well, listen, Daryl, you're kind of in the lead position on cash at close, but the terms on your seller note, they're kind of out of sync with the market, or whatever it is, right? And so you're adjusting. And so when everyone finally goes pencils down, like, you call me up and you're like, Marvin, what you've got is my best and final. We're tapping out on this deal. If that doesn't get it done, I guess it's not the deal for us. I get that call 5 times. Great. Then we go to the business owner and we say, okay, here's 5 possibilities. Which one do you like the best? I'm simplifying, but that's how it nets out, right? Yeah. And now you, if you're the business owner, you might not like the answer that the market's given you, but you've got 5 negotiated answers from the market about the view of your business at this moment in time, right? Yeah. And if one of them meets your criteria, you pick it, and then we start the second half, right? So, and then, I think more things go wrong in the second half than the first half, believe it or not. So when you start the process, you think the goal is to find a buyer. Well, that's sort of like saying that the goal of climbing Mount Everest is to get to the summit, right? It's not. When you get to the summit, you realize the goal of climbing Mount Everest is to actually get back to base camp without dying.
Right. Yeah. That's a good goal.
Right? It's a really good goal, right? All your friends think that getting to the summit was the goal. Your wife's goal for you is that you get back down safely to base camp and home, right? It's the same thing with a deal. Getting an LOI is the summit. Getting to a wire transfer is the goal. And so, as investment bankers, we believe we add, significantly more value kind of in the second half on the way down than we do on the way up. And what happens on the way down? Well, there's due diligence, there's quality of earnings, there's legal, there's HR, there's environmental. I mean, it just goes on and on, right? All the due diligence things. Then there's all the fine points that have to be negotiated in a purchase agreement, some of which get negotiated in the LOI if you're doing a good job, but there's always more. Managing all of the processes and the personalities and kind of quarterbacking it all. It's a ton of work, and it's not something that if you haven't done it 25 or 50 times, you just don't know what all the moving pieces are.
Right.
And there's sort of no way I had this conversation with someone recent, a couple of days ago. There's no way to get that experience without going through it. there are no analogies. Like you can't go practice somewhere else for this. It's like driving F1 or something. Like it's just a unique experience.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really an important experience as well, because some people dedicate their entire lives to building it and they want to exit. And some people, they've got a great plan. I want to back up a little bit. Let's talk about why some of the reasons someone would do a merger or acquisition. You mentioned that you had done it for growth. Can you speak to that a little bit, and maybe some of the other reasons why would you even bother?
Yeah. So, we focus on helping people sell. Okay. And so obviously the reason that you might want to sell your business is the obvious ones. You're ready to retire. You've got enough money and you want to go do something else. Your goal is to be a serial entrepreneur. Spent 5 years on this one. It's kind of in a good spot. You'd like to monetize that, invest that in your next great idea. You're a 0 to 1 person, not really a 1 to 10 person. So it's a good time. So there's a whole range of reasons. Those are good reasons. Reasons we hear frequently are I'm burned out. I don't want to do this for another minute. Like we'd like to chat with you before you get to that point, because that's not usually a good scenario. We've lost money for the last 3 years. That tends to be pretty problematic, but there's a whole range of reasons why you might sell. The reasons to buy are that you want to grow inorganically, right?
So how do you grow through buying another business?
Well, you find a business that's synergistic to yours in whatever way, right? I mean, if you have a dry cleaners on this corner and there's a dry cleaners a mile away that's for sale, well, now you have 2 dry cleaners, right? Or whatever. So it's just inorganic growth. And the reason to grow inorganically is either just to increase the overall size of the business, right? Or, hopefully because there's some synergies, like both companies have an accountant and you can just pay one accountant so you can eliminate some expense, right? You can gain some buying power. And then the thing I think that a lot of people don't understand about how this works is at the very simplest level, the value of a business is its free cash flow times some number. They call it a multiple, right? Don't worry about what the multiple is. Just for giggles, let's say it's 5, right? So you have a free cash flow of $1 million. The multiple is 5. Your business is worth $5 million. All right. Well, now let's say that you go buy 2 more businesses that look exactly like yours. Okay. Well, now you have $3 million of free cash flow. Well, the multiple on $3 million of cash flow is no longer 5. It's 6. Well, what just happened? You just created $3 million out of thin air.
Right.
You bought 3 companies for $15 million that combined are now worth $18 million. Poof, there's $3 million.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to understand PE, that's all you got to know. That's what private equity that's the game private equity firms are playing, whether they're KKR or Carlyle or 2 guys in a WeWork. That's the game. It's all about this multiple expansion. So if you as a business owner are trying to take advantage of multiple expansion, which is what my business partner and I were trying to do, then that's why you might do it. The other reason we were trying to do it was we were trying to dominate we had a regional business. And so we were trying to be the only game in town in certain regions.
Yep.
Gave us some pricing power.
Yep.
Right. So there's lots of different reasons to do it.
So how do you have to do it? I mean, a lot of people, they feel like, oh, I'd like to do that for my business, but I can't afford to buy another business.
Well, there's this wonderful organization, in the bowels of our government called the Small Business Administration. And contrary to popular belief, they don't actually loan money, but they guarantee loans, kind of like the FDIC. And so if you're a bank and you have money to loan and you participate in the SBA program, you can make a loan. So Daryl, you can go get a loan, and the bank that gives you that loan gets an 85% guarantee, 80 to 90, call it 85% guarantee from the SBA. So they're basically loaning you money at 0 risk, because if you default, the government will make them whole. So they're anxious to do this, right? Because they're going to make prime plus, 250 bips or whatever it is at effectively 0 risk.
Wow. Great.
Right?
There's only upside.
There's only upside. And so not to get political, but I think that a big reason why the United States has such a vibrant small business ecosystem is because of the Small Business Administration and these so-called 7A loans. So the answer to your question is if you want to buy another company and you already own one and it's similar, right? You're basically a slam dunk.
Right.
You can go to a bank that does SBA loans. You can sit down with a banker. You can show them your business. You can show them your financials. You can show them a business plan for the combined business. And, they're going to finance you. You can also just get commercial debt from a bank or other sorts of alternative lending solutions.
So then I guess the real thing that matters, and forgive me if I'm wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the two things that matter most in this is making sure that they've got clean financials, the business that you're buying, that you can trust, and also that you're fully aware of everything operationally that goes, that there's not necessarily even a founder bottleneck, that could be a choke point where you buy this business, everything looks good, but now with that key man or those 1-2 key people replaced, everything just turns to mashed potatoes on it.
Yeah. So, if we want to go down the track of what are all the things, that's a whole other podcast probably to talk about. Listen, I've bought a lot of businesses and, I think the simplest thing to say is it's not for the faint of heart. There is lots and lots and lots of things that can go wrong. Many, many acquisitions don't go well. They don't make the model, et cetera, et cetera. But, if you want, I think that the people who are in the best position to buy a business are owners of a very similar business, right? But that requires you to be opportunistic, right? That Bill down the, in the next town over or whatever has got a dry cleaners and he's run it for 30 years and you've got a dry cleaners and you've been frenemies with Bill for, 30 years. And when he's finally ready to retire, he calls you up and he says, Daryl, I think I'm going to hang up my tetrachloroethene and, and you're like, okay, let's do a deal, right? But that's a once in 30-year event.
Right.
Going out and buying a business. And there, a lot of the people that we sell, so our client is the owner of the business who wants to sell, right? But a lot of the people that we're working with are people who don't own a business, but are trying to buy a business to own and grow, right? It's called entrepreneurship through acquisition. So there's two ways, right? You can either start a business from scratch, or you can go out again with one of these SBA 7A loans. You don't have to own a business to qualify for one of these loans, right? 10% down typically.
American, or the business just has to be in the States?
I do think you have to be a U.S. citizen. Yeah. And the business has to be in the U.S.
Of course, I know that they wouldn't loan out of country. So obviously the business, you need to be doing business in the United States. The business needs to be in the United States. Yeah.
So anyway, if instead of starting a business from scratch, you want to buy a going concern and then your business is growing that business, then this is a great opportunity. And there's a lot of people out there who are pursuing this path. It's exactly the path my business partner and I pursued. We had a small amount of assets and we were able to make a down payment and we got an SBA loan. And
I know a guy in Canada did something similar. I think it was radon. It was like they're going around checking people's basements for radon. That was a business that he had gotten into.
Yep.
Now, what about, so it sounds like, like you said, the safest thing is to be in that business so you understand the nooks and crannies, you understand what you're getting into. But the majority of people aren't in that business. They're either trying to entrepreneurship through acquisition, as you mentioned, or maybe they're doing some sort of 90-degree strategy where they've got like a daycare center facility or something, and they want to buy some sort of restaurant chain.
Right. They want to diversify.
Yeah. They want to diversify. They have a shared customer base with the business they're looking to buy, and they want to grow through sharing the leads between the two businesses.
Yeah. Those are all great strategies.
Right. So I guess kind of walk through again the biggest mistakes, because I said they need clean financials and they need to know how the operations go. But you say there's a lot of different ways. There's so much, I call it black belt eyes. I have a buddy in Miami who has $1 million martial arts school, and he talks about how when he first started, he's done martial arts his whole life, and that when he would look for a coach, he was always impressed if the person could kick him in the head because he's been doing martial arts his whole life. Like, they must be good. So when he started his own school and he was just in a garage, he thought, well, every time I get a new student, I'm going to make sure I kick them in the head before they leave the class so they know how good I am. And then he couldn't figure out why people weren't coming back.
Right.
It's because he was kicking him in the head on their first day. And he forgot what it was like to be a new person walking in and being that. So we called that black belt eyes. So for you, you've been doing this so long, you have such black belt eyes. Again, like what are some of the biggest, like you said, there's 100 ways it can go south. What are some of the biggest caveats? What are some of the key, if I'm rock climbing, what are the key hand and footholds I need to keep a grip of?
So let's talk about it from the perspective of a person selling a business, right? Because I think it's just two sides of the same coin, right?
Yeah,
So
okay.
if you're a business owner, right, and you want to sell your business, what are the things that you need to make sure you've got in order to sell? All right.
Mhm.
So the first thing is your financials need to be clean.
Mhm.
And what that really means is three things, right? You've got a set of financials that work, right? You've got an income statement, you've got a balance sheet, you've got and they all kind of tie together, right? QuickBooks is going to ensure that this happens, but nonetheless. Number two, you've got tax returns that are filed properly that tie to those financials, right? And then the third thing is you have the kind of third party statements, bank statements, credit card statements, invoices, payroll documents, et cetera, that when we do what's called a quality of earnings, it's basically a buy side audit of your business that they can go to all of those source materials. So the way a quality of earnings typically works is they don't ask you for your finance.
Right.
They ask you for all the source materials, and they build a set of financials based on those source materials, and then they compare that to your actual financials, and they point out all the discrepancies.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Right. And they reconcile all that to your tax returns.
Right.
So anyway, that's the very first thing you can do. You've already mentioned the second thing, right? But one of the biggest reasons why it's difficult to sell a business is that it's too reliant on the owner. So the sooner you can get yourself out of being a bottleneck, the more marketable your business is going to be. And again, the flip side from as a buyer, nobody wants to buy a job, right? And everybody sort of realizes intuitively that I'm not going to walk into this thing and have the same level of expertise that the owner has. So I'm probably going to make a bunch of mistakes and cost myself a bunch of money. So, but if the owner's got a general manager and they've got a bookkeeper and they've got whatever, it's like, oh, okay. So this owner is actually working on the business. That's something that I can see myself doing. And there's not a bunch of processes that only run through the owner. There's not a bunch of decisions that only the owner's making. There's not a bunch of customer relationships that only the owner has. There's not some expertise. We talked before the call started, like it's tough to sell a dental practice, for example. Like I'm not a dentist. I can't buy a dental practice.
Right.
I don't have the expertise. Right.
Yeah,
making sure that there's not some now look, if you're in a business and there is some specialized expertise that's required for it, all you can really do is make sure that there's someone else who also has that specialized expertise within the business that can sort of carry on for you when you're no longer the owner.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that opens it up for someone who doesn't have your expertise.
Yeah, that's powerful.
And then, I think the other thing that the last reason that deals die, and again, this is applicable to both sellers and buyers, is that people can't come to agreement on valuation.
Someone spent 30 years on something, or they've got a number in their head that they believe, and they're going to squeeze you and the other person to make that fantasy become real. You see this all the time. You watch Dragon's Den or Shark Tank.
Yeah,
how much you done in sales?
absolutely.
10,000 in sales. Don't worry. What's your valuation? $10 billion.
Right. Yeah. No. And that, right. The sharks just laugh. Well, and here's here's the thing that I will say to owners, right? What you need for the valuation to be has absolutely nothing to do with what the market valuation is going to be. So say that a different way. I need my business to be worth $5 million in order for me to retire, which is what I want to do, but it's actually only worth 3.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, if you've got some runway, I would kind of do those calculations talk to an investment banker like me or somebody, get some sense what your business is worth today. And if there's a gap between that and what you need, then, if you talk to me as an example, I have people I can refer you to who are experts. Daryl, you're also one of them, at helping people navigate that, hey, I've got to close a $2 million valuation gap before I can sell. I'd like to do that in the next 36 months. Let's come up with a plan, right?
Yep.
But,
Yep.
if you've gotten yourself to the point where you're burned out, or God forbid you're ill, or there's some other life event, it gets pretty tough, right? I've got a client right now who has Parkinson's disease.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the situation that they're in, right? X gap between what their business is worth and what they need it to be worth.
Now you can bridge that gap without, this is a question, but I'm saying it like a statement. Can you bridge that gap while maintaining revenue the same? Are there things that you can do internally to try to bridge that gap? I mean, I don't know if you're going to double the valuation. Are there things like buying the building that you're in, or having better documentation and processes, or having all these 3 keys that you mentioned done, in advance and done well?
Yes. Yeah. So I think that the kind of keys we talked about do one of two things. They either make a deal possible where it wouldn't have been before. Like if your financials don't tie to your tax returns, you're not going to sell your company. It's just not going to happen. No one's going to, right?
Nobody wants to buy that bag of worms.
Right. Exactly right. So it either makes the deal possible, or this multiple that we're talking about. I mean, I just gave you a number, 5x or 6x, but it's actually a range, right? So there are companies out there that will sort of score you. Value IQ, I think, is one of them. But you can sort of put in your business parameters and what industry you're in, and et cetera, and it'll come back and say, hey, you're 40% on this and 60% on this and 10% on that, and whatever. And based on all of these, we think your multiple is blah, but the range is this to that. And if you move this from 10% to 90%, then your multiple goes from, 4.2 to 4.7, right? So you can start figuring that stuff out, but fundamentally, can you double the value of your business by working inside of it? No.
Right.
Yeah. Unless your cost structure is so bloated that you can actually double your EBITDA by taking out costs. At the end of the day, the thing that business owners really struggle, I think, in some cases to understand is buyers buy cash flow.
Right. Yes.
Buyers buy cash flow. They might be willing to pay slightly, they might be willing to pay X for the cash flow, or 5X for the cash flow, or 9X for the cash flow, but they're buying cash flow. Yeah. So nowhere is the statement cash is king, more true than in business valuations. Like if you want your business to be more, make more money.
Yep.
It's that simple.
Yeah. No, I think that's really insightful. I think, so it sounds like you got to get your revenues up and you got to have your financials clean, and the other stuff are nice to have. But I also know,
I would say that operating efficiency is a pretty big key, right? I definitely wouldn't tell someone raise your revenue and ignore your operating efficiencies. I would say raise your revenues and improve your operating efficiencies. But at the end of the day, if you keep your operating efficiency the same and you raise your revenue, it probably has a more significant effect on your bottom line than going in and finding a 0.25% savings in your.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think there's some people that are buying that want to find a way to improve operational efficiency. And that's why
that is such a great point. I say this to business owners all the time, because business owners, especially when it comes to selling their business, are experts at letting perfection be the enemy of good enough. And that's what I tell them. I'm like, look, if there's nothing wrong with your business, then there's no opportunity for the new buyer. All they can do is go out and sell more, right? They can't bring any of their expertise to bear on the business. So I'm with you 100%. There's no perfect business. And so long as they're disclosed, so long as there's sort of solutions for them, so long as whatever, what you see is the warts and the hair, right? The buyer is going to see as their opportunity to add value.
Mhm.
So it's okay. Like, don't try to get it perfect before you sell it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think that's a really valid, and I appreciate you expanding on that. You know, the warts and hair sometimes are part of the value to the buyer because they see the warts in the hair and they've got a plan for how to fix it, despite you having just let it become hairier all their time. That's their opportunity.
What
Yeah.
we do as investment bankers is we highlight that, right? So we turn the warts and hair into positives, right? The thing you don't want to have happen is to have some significant negative feature of your business appear to be hidden and the buyer finds it on their own.
Yeah, that's a bad
That's a bad day.
Yeah.
Right. So, but we'll be like, they have customer concentration. All right, great. So we'll turn that into a positive. Listen, actually it's not customer concentration because inside of this one customer, there's 7 different buyers. So this really is 7 individual customers. It's just they all roll up into this one organization, which we've got deep expertise in. But you have these 7 others that compete with them who are potential clients that we really haven't focused on because we've been working here, and this is all upside. Great. Well, so we now just turned a customer concentration problem, which is a classic deal killer, into, well, first of all, it's not actually customer concentration because if you peel back the onion, what you discover is this, and now it's wash, rinse, and repeat over here.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's a really great point. Can you speak to earnouts and the financing?
Yes.
So because a lot of people, they want to sell their business. They're think they're going to get a big payday, but often they don't. They get some money up front or no money up front, and they get cash over time. They get, they basically get a dividend for however many years. Can you speak to kind of how that plays out and what some of the possibilities are? Just set expectations on both sides.
Yeah. So I guess what I would say is if you find yourself in contemplating a deal along any of those lines that you kind of, without some sort of extenuating circumstance, you're not being well represented. Okay. So every deal, I want to be careful. So the vast majority of deals should include a pretty significant cash at close component. Call it 80%. The classic textbook deal for a lower middle market business is 80% cash at close, and I'm sorry, 90% cash at close, 10% seller note. And the way that's accomplished is the buyer puts 10% down, they get an 80% loan from the SBA, and the seller finances 10%, and it's junior to the SBA loan. Okay, so that's a pretty classic deal. Interestingly enough, if you're doing an SBA deal, they don't allow earnouts, so that's not even on the table. Like you can't even do an earnout if it's an SBA deal. Okay, but SBA deals cap at $5 million. So if your business is worth more than $5 million, the textbook deal is you get 80% cash at close. There'll be maybe 5% of that, up to 10% of that in escrow, against certain performance requirements. And then you'll roll.
Say that again. I was writing down. I was writing.
If you're over 5 million, then the sort of standard deal will be 80% cash at close. 10% of that 80% will be in some escrow that gets paid out over a year or two that ties you into performing transition services and whatever. And then the other 20% will be what's called rolled equity. So you still own, it varies, but the simplest way to think about it is you still own 20% of the company.
And they'll buy you out later.
They'll buy you out later. Exactly right. Those are the 2 kind of classic deal structures. If you ask me what I think about earnouts, I'll tell you that I hate them.
Sure.
And the reason is that they almost, vast majority of the time, they just lead to pain. They look great on paper. There's just way too many ways for them to sideways.
Not enough Indians? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, here's a classic, right? As a buyer, you want the earnout to be based on EBITDA, right? As a seller, I want it based on revenue. Why? because I'm not in control of what sits between
Yes.
revenue and EBITDA
And
anymore,
that's
right?
very flexible. Yeah.
Very flexible. Exactly right. So, a friend of mine was in a mastermind group and dropped after the meeting where she realized that the whole conversation was about how to structure earnouts that you had no intention of paying. Yeah. Well, right. So don't assume best intent necessarily, right?
No, this is something it took me embarrassingly, a couple of turns at the rodeo to realize that they're like my parents are Canadian. They're here visiting, and bless their souls, most Canadians are so good natured. We're known as the friendly people, but there are people that have no qualms about eating your lunch and smiling in your face while they twist a knife. There are people out there who have no moral compass. There are people out there that have every justification, and that's part of the. I don't want not to get. You said not to get political, but that's part of why we need free markets. Like you be a socialist and a communist with your family, but with the general public, you need to have mutually assured destruction and and trade.
Yeah.
And a mutual agreement on value, because you just don't know.
That's right.
You just don't.
Not to toot our horns or whatever, but this is what a good advisor, a good representative, a good investment banker, these are the potholes that we've, flattened our tires in the past, that we've, run off the road because of whatever. We have the school of hard knocks experience to help hopefully our clients avoid these things, because they look really, really good on the PowerPoint slide. I mean, they really do. Yeah. And unless okay, well, these are the 7 ways this goes bump in the night, there's a good chance you're going to sign up for it and then realize after the fact, oh crap, I'm never going to see that money. Right. And then all these other wacky structures where I give you, 20% down, and I'm working a deal right now, and the owner is talking to a competitor of his about potentially, and that was literally the deal this gentleman proposed. Well, look, I'll just take over your book of business and I'll pay you $50,000 a month. What? No. This is not how deal. This I don't know where that deal comes from. Yeah, again, outside of extenuating circumstances, there should be a substantial portion of the business in cash at close, and then some component potentially of contingent compensation. I like zero contingent compensation. I'm fine with seller notes. I'm fine with escrows. I'm fine with rolled equity, depending on who the buyer is. But after that, these kind of more creative structures.
So let's break that down, because I think there's people that might listen to this that they might be the entrepreneur that wants to buy a business, but they go, I've got a job and I'm good at my job, but at the end of the month, like there's just not a lot left over. And my dream, my passion is arts and crafts, and I'm so good at it. My friends and family all tell me I should teach art lessons, and there's this arts and crafts community center around the corner, and they've been there for 15 years, but I need something like a 20% down because I don't, for whatever reason, I don't qualify for the SBA, or I'm not in America. And how do I get in there? So you said seller notes, escrows, rolled equity are probably where they need to look for amenable terms. Is that
right?
Can you expand?
Well, look, I mean,
yeah.
So the SBA is a US only thing, but there are banks everywhere, right? So you can get commercial loans to buy businesses. I mean, banks have been making these loans since the beginning of banks, right? So, I do think that you have to size your ambitions to your balance sheet.
Right. Now, with a commercial loan, is it like a home mortgage where the weight of because there's a difference. If I go to buy a 20-unit multifamily property, some of the income from that property helps prop me up in front of the bank, so to speak.
Yeah, no,
is
for
a
sure.
Commercial loan like that, yeah, but a lot of people don't know, right? So how does that work? Is a commercial loan different, where the commercial loan is primarily on the likelihood of success of the business, or is it still this person's own personal finance? If someone's doing, I'll just leave it at that for now.
No, look, at the end of the day, the covenant that counts is what's called debt service coverage ratio,
Mhm.
right? So it's what's the how does the cash flow of the business compare to on a monthly or yearly basis
Mhm.
compared to the principal and interest payments, right? It's got to be more. The question is how much more?
Yeah.
Is it 20% more, 50% more, 100% more, whatever? But, the bottom line is so long as the business makes enough money to cover the debt, the bank's going to be happy.
What's a good percentage to aim for? I mean, you've been inside so many deals.
The lowest I've seen is maybe a service coverage ratio of 1.2. So, if the business makes $10,000, or if the debt service is $10,000 a month, the business has got to make $12,000 a month. Now, you can tell from those numbers that's thin.
Yeah, that's
right?
super thin. So you want to go much higher.
Maybe 1.5. But again,
It depends.
it does scale, and I mean, there's lots of factors that go into it, but that's the simple example.
Yeah,
so,
but for people here, because typically what's going to happen, I think for a lot of people, is they're going to try it themselves, and it's when they get stuck. Like it'd be the smartest people will talk to someone like you in advance. The smartest people will build a dream team, and they'll talk to a big 5 accounting firm, and they'll get all their ducks in a row, and then they go on this venture. But most people are probably going to venture down that trail and wait till they trip over a rock or they get poked in the eye by a stick because they're bushwhacking off the beaten trail. And then they go look for a guide and for help. And so just to help some of those people get further down the trail, so to speak, so they're really committed. That I think is a good for people because again, like you say, for most people, this is almost like a Wild West as I understand it, it's still almost a bit of a Wild West where you negotiate. There's industry standards, but there's a lot of people doing deals over a coffee table, like you said, like down in 50K a month. And people, the business owner it's that black belt ice thing. I've been doing this for 5 years, 10, 15 years. I think I'm giving you a good deal, but I don't realize all the things that you don't know as a buyer. And then you step in and now you hate my guts because I didn't say this is this, which is maybe true, but we just did a coffee table deal. Oh, I think that's worth.
Yeah, I mean, again, I recommend everybody to get professional representation. I mean, one of the curses of being competent, I guess, is that you can do lots of different things reasonably well, right? But very few of them can you do as well as an expert. So, if you're trying to buy a business, engage a buy-side broker, right? And look, I mean, simple thing, like you can go to a bank. Wells Fargo is one of the biggest SBA lenders out there, right? Okay. Go down to your local Wells Fargo branch and ask to talk to the loan officer. Sit down with them, disclose your personal balance sheet to them, have them help you fill out a personal financial statement, and get pre-qualified for an SBA loan. That'll tell you how big a business you can be. If you pre-qualify for $500,000, well, don't try to buy a $5 million business. It's not going to go well. So, I mean, there's really simple things that you can do without spending any money.
Yeah.
You can call me, right? You're going to put my email in the show notes. You can reach out to me. I'll have a conversation with you. You might not like what I tell you, but I'll get you oriented to the reality.
Yeah.
At least have some facts when you leave.
Jim Rohn's got a great quote. If you have an idiot and you motivate them, now you just have a motivated idiot. But if you have an idiot and you educate them and point them in the right direction, then at least they're going to get there, whether they're motivated or not.
That's exactly.
So if people do want to reach out, what are some of the best ways for them to get in touch?
Just, you'll put it in the show notes, but it's marvin.karlow@raincatcher.com. And I'll respond with a scheduling link, and you just book time on my calendar and we'll chat about whatever you want to talk about.
Right. So that's rainmaker.com.
Raincatcher, marvin.karlow@raincatcher.com.
So go check out raincatcher.com or send an email to marvin.karlow, Karlow. That's Karlow, Karlow @raincatcher. CATCHER.com. You can also go check out raincatcher.com. Marvin, this has been a great call. I've got, your page of notes, beautiful insights. I think this is, for a lot of people, it's a wonderful way to look into getting into entrepreneurship. For a lot of businesses that are trying to find a unique way to grow both in valuation, but also for, to prepare themselves. I think this is an amazing avenue to explore. It's a well-proven path to financial freedom for a lot of people if it's done right, but it is full of potholes. And so I really appreciate you coming and sharing with us your insights. Again, if anybody has questions, Marvin is open for your questions. Just send him an email at marvin.karlow@raincatcher.com. Marvin, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
Oh man, we could talk for the rest of the week about this, but no, I think it's a good place to leave it. I really appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to talking to some members of your audience over the next few weeks.
Yeah, thank you for coming and sharing with us, knowing you got your own family, your own direct reports, your own clients. Thank you for coming and sharing with us so we can all do a little bit better.
You're welcome, Dale. Thanks for your time.